Are you clear on what your profession is? Does the client understand what you do together?
The longer you work with somebody, the more comfortable you become with them, the less it becomes about coaching. So you pay attention to your sessions, what happens in the first few minutes. I've been blessed to work with quite a few people for 3+, 4+ years. And one thing I've kept is that, hey, I'm there to serve them, support them. They can look at me as a friend, but I will not act like a friend. If somebody came up with a system a while ago and then it gets passed down to the next one, more than likely they forgot the reasons for which they set those up. And what humans do is we just carry forward without thinking. A lot of times we just copy, carry forward.
Welcome, Coaches Nation, to our podcast, The Coach's Journey, brought to you by Coaching Mastery Community. We're here with Faisal Ensan and myself, Daniel Fernandez. We are co-hosting our podcast today on the topic of boundaries. This is a topic that doesn't come up in conversation explicitly sometimes, but it's always there in the background. It's a really important part of the relationship that you build with your clients. So, do you know what your boundaries are? Do you know what they might be for an ideal relationship with your clients? Do you enforce them? How do you deal with boundaries? What happens when your boundaries get violated? These are all topics we can explore today. And I'm really excited to talk to Faisal about this because we both obviously had situations in our coaching careers that test boundaries. So I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation, maybe sort of like behind the scenes of what's going on in coaching sessions sometimes, or in the coaching relationship around boundaries. Faisal, are you excited to talk about this topic as I am?
I don't know if I'm excited to talk about it.
Fair. I'm excited to hear your perspective on this for sure. But
I am excited to hear your perspective because we can learn a lot from each other's experiences. It's one of those things I feel like from a professional standpoint, I paid attention to early on, but it never crossed my mind too much until a few things happen on the way. And then, but I actually just recently, yesterday, I talked to one of our coaches who dealt with this and he did not know how to handle it. And it was and it is difficult to deal boundary issues. And plus, keep in mind, coaching world is unregulated. We don't have policies. We don't have set standards. Everybody has different kind of contracts. So we don't actually know how to, just as a starting point, there are no set rules and guidelines to do this. So we kind of have to figure this out as we're moving. We're given some guidelines when we go through certifications or if we go through some kind of training, but we're kind of figuring this out as we're going until we have a clear set of guidelines built as coaches do this for a long period of time and as industry built. But all we can do at this point is share our experience of it and what we see in the coaches in our community and how we address it. And then you're going to have to add your approach to it.
yeah, well, I'd love to kick it off with one of those examples that you're talking about. Maybe share the example of one of our coaches in Coaching Mastery Community, obviously anonymously, but maybe that'd be a really interesting one to start with because I'm curious about what that situation was.
He will know right off the bat.
But nobody else will know, right?
Nobody else will know. Nobody else would know. So the situation came up like this. So and this is you're going through with a client for it's a 3-month package, and at the end of the session, at the end of the package where he's about to go for a renewal or he's about to make another offer, the client directly says, "I like you." And she has feelings for him and he doesn't know how to respond and it catches him off guard. And to add to that, she thinks she concluded that based on the way that was happening, which was very odd. So the way it worked out, he created 2 packages. One was a one-on-one package, the other one was group package. Now he doesn't have a lot of clients, so he told them that you're going to be part of my group coaching. I don't know how he communicated this, but I'm just starting out, so it might just be you. And I'm not clear if he has communicated that or not, but she concluded based on just her being on those group coaching calls that he was keeping his other clients away to be close to her.
The irony. Wow.
And it's one of those odd situations. How the hell do you deal with that?
Wow.
And
That's interesting.
so now he is in a conundrum and he kind of gave her space, but he didn't know how to approach it. So we can talk about how I suggested you could approach it.
Before you tell me how you suggest, I want to just say like my reaction to this and how
I know, right?
how I hope I might have handled it. And not that that's the best way. That hasn't happened to me that way before. So that's really interesting. So the context was they got to the end of the coaching session, and then she's like, "Hey, I like you, right? Like romantically or whatever, right?"
Yeah.
So this is one session, or this is multiple sessions or a package? You said.
This was at the end of a 3-month package.
Okay, great. So I think first let's acknowledge the relationship you build with your clients when you do deep coaching work and transformational work can be really powerful and really close and really intimate, for lack of a better word. And so there's a lot of emotions and support that you go through as a client from your coach. And so that's, it's not probably unexpected sometimes for somebody who's in the space of being attracted to that. The question is, what should happen with those feelings, right? And from a coach's perspective, what is ideal here? And I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb to say don't date your clients. But I would think my first impulse would be to actually make time to address that. Like to me, that's a coaching opportunity. Like everything that happens with a client is a coaching opportunity, right? If you think about it. If the client's angry with you, like like specifically, I'm talking about if in the relationship with your client, whatever the client says about you or about the coaching relationship or about themselves within that relationship, it's all fodder for coaching because that's coming up because there's something to potentially coach through. Usually, right? If there's something that just like makes you uncomfortable, it's almost certainly a coaching opportunity for the relationship as well as for the person that is doing it. So I would think I would want to say like, hey, let's just take a minute here and acknowledge what just happened. Like just come out and say like, hey, I hear you. I appreciate, that you said that out loud, that you had the courage to share that. And I might actually just talk about that as a thing that happened in the coaching relationship. And so like what would be the ideal way to address this? And like role model like proper boundary settings and proper like consciousness and intention around it. Because I think if you let it go unspoken and undecided, then there's this whole awkwardness hanging around and they're like hopeful that things are going to go somewhere. But there's also the coaching relationship that, if you want to keep this client or you don't, that could be a big question too after that. And it would vary depending on the circumstances and context. If I can get them to the place where I feel confident that they understand the relationship and the boundaries, maybe we could continue. But sometimes if I don't, maybe we can't. It's possible. So I think it's really important to hit it head on and respond to it as a human to a human in a coaching context with the opportunity to coach because you already have permission to coach in this situation. So it's like to me, it's not necessarily wrong that they said that. Like I don't see like somebody being attracted to me as a coach being wrong. Like they're attracted to what they're attracted to based on the relationship. But if you can be super clear with like, hey, that happened. That's not so for me. I have a wife, I have kids. I am not interested in pursuing any kind of relationship there. So my context, and I don't know what their context is. My context is no, there's no entertaining of where that could lead. Just zero. I think I'd be pretty obvious and clear about it. Because I talk about my wife and kids in our relationship in coaching a fair bit. So by the time they got to the end of a 3-month with me, or even a 6-month or whatever, they've heard from it multiple times about how my relationship is working and what we can apply in the coaching environment and stuff. So I would think that it would be very hard for them to get to that point to think that that's an okay thing to say. And if they did, I feel pretty confident I'd be able to bring it back and be like, let's talk about this from a coaching lens, right? Because that's you also have the safety of the coaching lens. If anybody violates a boundary, there's a coaching opportunity and coaching lens you can apply to it because you have permission there. So that would be my initial reaction. I don't know the exact words that I would use, but that's kind of where I go with it. How about you, Faisal?
Yeah, there are a few things in there, and I want to share an experience around this. So a few years ago, I was in Europe, and I was at this conference, and lots of coaches in there, a lot of newer coaches, and this conference is like heavily female. There's like lots of them, and you, because I'm a very experienced coach, and they pick that up very quickly, and I know what I'm talking about. You can tell their perception is shifting already, and it's not hard to tell if somebody's attracted to you in those contexts. So for me, one thing became clear. First of all, I saw a danger for myself because it's like for me, it's like that's flattering that a bunch of women want to be around me, and I'm kind of I'm the experienced coach. They want to learn from me and all that stuff. But the thing that was important in that moment, I also noticed the danger around it. The danger is that like we can all succumb to those kind of challenges. And even though we might be conscious, we can underestimate human emotions, human tendencies, all sorts of things around that. So for me, what Daniel said, and this might be different for somebody who's single versus somebody who might be in a relationship, in a committed relationship. I'm just like Daniel. I'm in a relationship. I'm committed to my wife, my kids. So I share my story a lot, and that story tells people where I'm at. And the other side of it is the professionality of how you approach situations. So the more, and this can be kind of discussed a little bit, but the more professional you appear, I think the more people see the boundary there. But the less professional you appear, I think that kind of muddles the boundaries and from a business and coaching standpoint. And so what does that mean for me? For me, if I'm talking to somebody or if I'm in conversation with, I'm fairly friendly with people, and people can misconstrue that in all sorts of ways. But I also um, two things. One, I need to understand my own energy, what's happening with me, because I might be attracted to somebody and that might be, but I need to understand what my boundaries are. I think that can give certain vibes. But the other side of it is I need to put it in the context of, hey, why are we talking? What's the purpose here? Where is this going? I need to be very clear around that, not give multiple different signals. And two, being clear about who you're at, what you stand for, your values. I think all that stuff makes it clear not to cross boundaries, and having some kind of process makes a difference as well. And let's say you're taking a client through a process, the more they see that you're a professional coach, the more they will treat you like a professional coach. But if they see that you're kind of doing this and you thought it would be a cool thing to do with them, that might get muddled in all sorts of ways. But think about it from, for example, we have precedents in the therapy world. Like if you go to a therapist's office and think about it, you're entering a professional office, you know, I mean, we don't have offices. But even with that, you can make it very official that, hey, you need to fill out this form, you need to sign this document, and here are the guidelines for how we can work together, and we can talk about some of these things. Now the differences might be because I talk about my relationships, I've talked about my family, my and the thing that might be the same is the values. So values will help people understand what you stand for in your profession. Like, do you take this sincerely? Is this important to you? Is this not? Or are you doing this as a side or not? So it communicates to people what you stand for. But the part that that will be difficult if somebody's single. If somebody's single, that I think that, and they're, especially if this coach is looking for somebody to be with, so that might send a bunch of vibes that he might not even be aware of.
You mean if
And
both people are available for a
both
relationship
people are available for a relationship, what happens in
independently?
that
Yeah.
case, right? That's
Yeah.
a different context than somebody who is in a committed relationship. It shows up very differently, I think. I think it becomes more of a responsibility for the coach to clarify where they stand, if they are single, and if they know, if the other person knows through their story that they are, because I think coaching is a little bit different than therapy in the sense that we share a lot too. We share a lot more experiences, we actually get closer, and I think the same danger falls in the world of therapy as well. You can get emotionally attached to somebody because you could, that could be the only person who fully understands you, that could be the only person who can connect with you, that could be the only person who you feel supported by in your life. That's a huge, I mean, that's incredible. That person is meeting pretty much every need that you have emotionally. Why wouldn't somebody be attracted to that? But I think if somebody is single, at least, and I haven't been since I've been in the coaching world, it would fall into my responsibility to do more to communicate what the professional relationship looks like, what the relationship outside looks like. Maybe it could even be part of the contract as well. I don't know, but it could be.
It's interesting. I think you bring up a few different cases. Like it's really pretty. It's not necessarily easy, but it's simpler if, for me as an example, I have a family and I'm very clear on where I stand. I know my values, and that's a really big part that you raised. I think is really important. If you know your values as a coach and you're in a committed relationship, that makes it super easy because you can even point to that. Hey, you can take the coaching lens. Like, let's think this through from your lens. What position are you putting the other person in? It's a communication opportunity, and you can also acknowledge them, and you can talk about it being normal. But whatever the case may be, like it's a lot simpler for the coach if it's just a really clear boundary because you're in a relationship. But if you are attracted to if you are single and somebody's attracted to you, and maybe you're attracted to them in some way, I don't know what the rules are on that, right? So I think if we take a page from the book of psychology, and I think you and Sherry talk about this in the other podcast, sometimes there's this transference thing that happens where somebody's attracted to their therapist for all the reasons you mentioned. And in that situation, I know the psychology boards have rules around that. There's like a time period where once therapy stopped, you have to wait, like I think it's a year or two or something like that before you can even consider that, right? Consider having a more, personal romantic relationship. It might be even true about friendships. I'm not even sure there, but Sherry would know. But let's say you are a coach and you are single and you're available and this client is available. The ethics rules in coaching are unregulated, are unclear. And I think more importantly, there's not a lot of discussion about these topics in the coaching world and how to approach it. So that's one of the reasons we're having this discussion today, because I think it's super valuable. Yeah, I think for me, I don't have a lot of clear guidance for everybody, but I do think we can take a page from the book of psychology and have cooling off period. I think that's a good general rule, because one of the things that I think is important to talk about is professionalism, because you brought that up. If you were attracted to your dentist, and you went to the dentist's office and you said that, the dentist is like, I'm wearing a mask and I have my tools and I have my x-ray machines. Like, you're clearly in their professional space and you know what that professional space is. But for people who are experiencing coaching, it might not be something they know what to expect in that professional space. And you might not expect that level of emotional closeness. And for me, I get really close with my clients personally, and they get close with me. And part of what I talk about when I talk to them, when I talk about referrals, actually, it's interesting. When I talk about who do you know who would love what we've done together, I talk about, hey, here's how you introduce them. You introduce them to your friend and coach Daniel. So like automatically I'm the coach and I'm the friend. And that's the context that I intentionally set when that comes up. But I think that context can be blurred if somebody has never experienced coaching, is available, is looking, and they think that I am too. So I never let it get to that. I never let it get to the point where I'm looking. But if you are, then there's a little bit of a tension there potentially. And so how clear are you on how you want to approach that as a coach? Is a question I'd ask you. Like, are you clear on what your boundaries and boundary setting would look like? You know?
And
But yeah,
there's another.
I just want to add one little point. Hang on. Professionalism. Are you clear on what your profession is? Does the client understand what you do together and the limits of that? Right. And so part of that is how you respond in text messages. If you use text messages, part of that is how you email. Part of that is how you conduct the sessions. Part of that, like your whole professional approach should scream, I'm a professional. I'm a professional. This is what I do with my job. Just like a dentist, right? When you go to the dentist's office, it's very clear. This person is a professional. Everything they do is around dentistry, right? And
Yeah, and,
so,
and it shows the
how do you
purpose
communicate?
of that. As soon as you say you're professional, it shows the purpose of that relationship. And if that's clear, usually people are very clear as to what's happening. And I think the place where coaching becomes a little bit vague is you're on a Zoom call or you're in person with somebody. It's not official looking. You're like, unless you have a bunch of official stuff behind you, like this is just the background behind me. Like you go to a doctor's office, there are like stuff hanging everywhere, and there's a doctor, and there are people going in and out. There's an assistant. Like you have a good, even in that case, people can become romantically involved with their doctor or patient or whoever. But of course, if you don't think about it, but I think the first step is they need to understand the purpose of your relationship. And sometimes, like Daniel said, like I'm fairly close with my clients. Like there are clients I've been together, like I've been with for 4+ years. We joke around about stuff. I say things that I would never say to any client who's starting out. I'll pull their leg, and I just know them so much that I know that they won't take it personally, and they know my intention enough in the process. And to me, that's fun. It makes the process fun. Like if you're working with somebody 4+ years, you gotta have fun in the process. But what they're clear about it, and I think every interaction counts. And my process is very similar for every interaction. And I think it's a subtle area, but a lot of people might miss this. The longer you work with somebody, the more comfortable you become with them, the less it becomes about coaching. So pay attention to your sessions, what happens in the first few minutes. The more it becomes very personal and less coaching frameworky, uh, the more you're communicating to the person that this is more of a friend conversation. which in some senses is not bad because it opens them up, but in another sense, I don't think they know what you're doing. And this is why one of the like within the first 5 minutes, I know that I need to talk about the purpose of the call. Like I need to be very clear about what we're doing on the call. In fact, within the first 5 minutes, after I get them to share something they're excited about, they're grateful for, what I either bring up something from the past, what we did together, that shows clearly what the purpose of the call is, or I'll say, hey, here's what we're covering today. It goes
I
very
love that.
well to that.
That is actually really good. It's a good to bring consciousness to this because I didn't realize that that's exactly what I was doing in my sessions. You know, the first 10 minutes can vary widely depending how long I've coached with the client, or depending what we've talked about recently. But I mean, we sometimes like someone will get on a call with me and we'll talk about their kids for like a good 5 minutes. But I'll always have like when I come into the sessions, sure, I'm personally connected. I have this friendship that's built, especially after a long time, but I have a coaching lens on. That's always the case in my sessions. Like it's always coaching. So if there's a lesson,
So,
I often
so you
like
mean
that.
you
Like
have an intention around being a
I have
coach?
an
That
intention.
that
I come into
intention
that
is important.
session always thinking about I'm a coach. How can I coach this person to level up, to be better, to achieve what they're trying to achieve, to take away those barriers? And so what's happening, even as we're talking about those kids, I'm watching for those opportunities. It's like that thing came up with kids, I'll often ask this question, like, "Hey, what did you learn from that? Like that experience? What's that? What is that teaching you? What can we take from that? Is there something that we need to do as a result of that?" It's always something like that that just reminds people right away. And I wasn't doing it consciously like you're talking about because I want to establish that as the purpose so we don't run into boundary issues, but it's just my frame. It's like I don't want to waste too much time talking without direction.
Yeah.
I want to have like the direction is the lighthouse. That's their vision for their life. That's what they want, right? I always have. That's why in the first few sessions we cover what's your vision, like what's your long term vision, and what are you trying to achieve right now, like short and long term vision. If you know that, and you'd probably know a lot of that by the time you get into coaching because you've already had the discovery sessions with them. But those first couple of sessions, it's like my direction is figure out the direction, and then as we continue, it's like that direction is always in my head. Do we need to update it? Let's go refer to it. There's always opportunities to let that come in, but using that as my lighthouse, I'm always like saying, like, how is this leading us that way? That's one of the things you can give to your clients as a gift. It's like they're hiring you to push them in that direction. So that makes it really clear. The purpose is always coaching. If you're always thinking about this client in that lens with that intention, that really helps, I think, set the professional frame.
And it comes down to, and this is something to, especially if you're new as a coach, you're preparing, but you might miss the fact that you're looking at the notes, you're looking at all that stuff, you're preparing your context, but you might not fully kind of check in with your own intentions. And I'm not saying you have ulterior intentions. I'm saying you need to check in with your energy, because I think what we miss a lot of times, our energy gives a lot of, like, our energy, our body language can communicate a lot to another person without us even speaking anything. So like Daniel said, when he goes with that lens, which means that the clear intention behind it, it can make a difference in communication. And those first 5 minutes actually set the tone for the rest of the session. That can get blurry the longer you work with a client. And this is, and I've been blessed to work with quite a few people for 3+, 4+ years. And one thing I've kept is that, hey, I'm there to serve them, support them. They can look at me as a friend, but I will not act like a friend. None of that means I can't have fun. There can be humor. I'm not talking about like a grumpy session where you get, no, there's a lot of emotions in my sessions. Like it goes all over the place. Sometimes it gets very intense. Sometimes it can go towards humor. Sometimes it can be challenged. Sometimes it can be playful. Like, I'm not saying sit like a therapist with your tie on and make it like be stiff. That's not what we're
My
saying.
therapist never wore a tie or tie like that.
Yeah, I mean, like the typical thing example, like the stereotypical
Yeah.
thing example of that. Like
Yeah.
I think I love the fact that coaching is a little bit more fluid and flexible in that sense. I actually love the fact that we don't have too many rules. I think rules can ruin things as well. Some rules are good, but the more rules you bring, it might create problems for people. I think you understanding your values and the client understanding that you're communicating that and having a process for your sessions can make a big difference. And the other, I'm wondering, Daniel, what do you think about having something in the contract around these kind of things? I don't have it.
This is a great question.
Because you're a
Before I
contract
answer that
person.
question, remember the kind of Remember the question? My contracts are like super simple. One page is like 3 lines in there.
But you
I
think
was
about
very,
contracts a lot more than I do.
yeah, that's more than you have, right? Um, so before I answer that question, an insight just occurred to me. To me, the response to whatever happens in the sessions or with the client in the relationship is about how do I keep this relationship super healthy and productive towards that lighthouse. So I have 2 lighthouses. One is the lighthouse the client wants, and the second lighthouse is the relationship that we need to have in order to keep on progressing that way.
Right.
And you can always bring it back to that second lighthouse as a result of the first lighthouse. So if somebody said, "Hey, I'm attracted to you," I'm like, "Okay, let's talk about this." Right. And I would say, like, my role here is your coach, right? You're paying me as your coach. Just remind them of the professional relationship. And here's what I want for you. I want all these things that you said you wanted, right? And that we know why you want them, blah, blah, blah. We remind them. And then we say, and the best relationship we can have towards that goal is for us to have the powerful coaching relationship that we have today. That's kind of how I'd bring it back. And here's how we're doing it. In order for us to maintain the coaching relationship, in order for me to do this for all my clients, I have to have clarity on where our relationship stands. So let's talk through this and make sure we're super clear so that I can help you get those things, because that's what you really ultimately want, right? And that's probably more important than this attraction in the moment. So that was the second lighthouse that I thought of just now. There's a double lighthouse. It's their lighthouse and our lighthouse in this relationship. That would be like something that I think I'm glad we're talking through this just in case it happens. I can, remember the double lighthouse for boundaries.
Yeah,
But then,
that's really important to think of it like, what again goes back to the purpose. Like, what is your intention? What is the purpose of the relationship? If that's clear, I think that deals with a lot of the problems. The other thing is, I think personality
yeah,
makes
yeah.
a
So
difference
let's go
as
back to
well.
the contract question. You asked about the
All
contract
right,
question,
contract.
Faisal.
Go to contract.
You
Yeah.
asked about the contract question. Let's talk about that before we move on. So I think actually before you sign up for coaching, it should be clear the nature of the coaching relationship. I think we'll talk about, like, as we coach together, now that you've signed up or whatever, I just want to make sure that we get the most powerful relationship we can create. And the way that we do that is, as we coach together, we tend to talk about things and we challenge and we push and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to get closer. You're going to learn a lot about me. I'm going to learn a lot more about you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to get close. And that's a normal part of the coaching relationship. Sometimes we'll, if you whatever, insert your communication modes here. Sometimes we'll email, sometimes we'll text, sometimes we'll be on sessions. There's going to be a connection that we form over the course of this relationship. And my intention for that relationship is to make it the most powerful thing that gets you towards the lighthouse that we talked about. And so that's why that's necessary, because for us, for us to build that trust in that relationship, we have to share and be open with each other. And so we will get close. And so just want to make sure we have total clarity. This is a professional relationship to help you get your goals. That's why you're paying me, right? You can do that up front. And there could be a line in the contract to say, like, you may get close with your coach, or you will get close with your coach. It's a normal intended part of the coaching relationship, the professional coaching relationship, right? So I don't know if I would put in there, like, don't get attracted to your coach, or like, you are not allowed to have a relationship with your coach. Like, I don't know if you need to go specify that and plant ideas like that. But I might include something in the contract, but like, what would we include in the contract? What would be the line? I would only put like one line about it. I wouldn't get too detailed about it. Maybe in the contract, there could be like expectations,
Yeah.
and clear agreements that you can walk through with them, and you can send it to them before they sign up. There might be expectation. This is a professional friendship. I like the word professional friendship. I learned that from Evan Pagan. What you're doing as a coach is you are a professional friend. That's your job, right? And like, the best friends we have support us and they encourage us and they help us and they are there for us in a way that makes a difference. And that's kind of like my task as a coach, to be a professional friend, and as a human too. I'm working to be a professional friend in my whole life, and so this just coaching is such a great practice towards that. And so knowing that the relationship is one of a professional friend might be something I would put in the contract, because I love that frame. That's me. How about you?
To be honest, I don't feel the need to put that. I feel like I'm very clear in my communication, and the reason why we're talking about it, so people understand and you can have your own process. And I think it depends on your confidence level, skill set, how you are, what incidences. It's going to shift and change. I mean, your contract is going to shift, your business model is going to shift. A lot of things are going to shift.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
true.
the coaching industry is evolving. We don't know what's going to happen with all these things. And going back to rules, I mean, there are reasons for a lot of rules, but there are also very stupid rules. in the world. And like and this is what happens. It's a very human thing. Like if you look at any culture, any society, a bunch of people will come together and they will see a problem, and based on that problem, they will start with some kind of value system or guideline. If that doesn't work, then they will probably add a bunch of rules to clarify.
We love
Okay, that
codifying.
it codifies and then moves forward. So think of the Ten Commandments. That was like a guideline. And then later on, a bunch of rules. Religion became more and more complicated. People added more and more rules, and people don't even know why there are rules.
Not just religion, law too.
Everything law, like the Code of it started with Code of Hammurabi. If we trace it back, then like if it's gotten more and more complex. Now, if you talk to a lawyer now versus if you did a few hundred years ago, it's a different world. It's a very because more complexity. And also, here's what humans do. So think of generational, like if somebody came up with a system a while ago and then it gets passed down to the next one, more than likely they forgot the reasons for which they set those up. And what humans do is we just carry forward without thinking. A lot of times we just copy, carry forward. And so, and this is part of the reason why when you look at a lot of therapists are very frustrated because a lot of them don't understand why they have those rules. They might have been set up for a reason, but they might not apply anymore. But there are so strict rules that they can't move beyond that, and they don't fully understand, and they feel restricted by it. Why? Because there are problems now. But I feel like there's value in understanding why there are guidelines and rules, and because we're in a very cool place in the coaching world that we can actually set up the foundations for that for other coaches to come and why there are. And one of those is that we're in a human relationship. It's very, and this will actually, I think, help a coach and a client, that it's very natural for people to feel. In fact, without feeling, a coaching session does not work. Without emotions being involved, it does not work. Like most of my sessions, I joke around about this. When somebody says, "Are you going to cry about this?" Like, I think I've cried enough today in my coaching session. Pretty much every session gets very intense for me, and I'm okay with that. Some people are not okay with that, but let's say there are a lot of emotions involved. So what does that mean? So what happens is, think of a person whose needs are not met in their relationships in their life, who are struggling a lot in intimacy and connection and love and support. And you come along, you're trying to help them create that, but guess what? They meet a lot of those needs with you, just getting on a call with you. What is going to naturally happen? They confuse their you supporting them with their needs being met within their life. So instead of trying to go do that, create those relationships in their life, they might actually just stick to you. And that's like, look out for signs for that. By the way, and when I've worked with couples, one of the things that does end up happening whenever there's infidelity, people get involved with somebody else. They confuse a need that they didn't know. They weren't meeting a need in the relationship, and they will go outside and they will connect with somebody, and all of a sudden this need is being met, and they will say, "Oh, I'm in love with this person," but they don't quite know what that need is, and they haven't explored it. And I've actually worked with a couple of couples through this. And as soon as they figure out what that was, they realize it's not about the person, it's about their own need. And they could have actually asked that from their life partner, or they could have actually explored that with their life partner. The life partner had no idea, and they caught them by surprise that this need was met by this other person. All of a sudden, they're in love. But that could have broken apart a whole, like this. I'm not talking about like somebody who just jumped into a relationship. Like these are people who have been married together for 15, 10, 20 years. And all of a sudden, one of them falls in love with somebody. Like, what does that mean? You have kids, you have family, you have everything. They don't know why it happened. They're shocked by it. And a lot of it goes back to actually not even related to now. It goes back to their past. There was a need that was not being met. And now this person is meeting it, but they don't know what it means. They're overrun with emotions. So that could happen in a coaching session. It could possibly, if you're not clear. And as coaches, I think because we're the professional, it's our responsibility to communicate that very well, to show up professionally, to understand how to handle it. And I love Daniel's point, which was actually my suggestion with the coach that I was talking about in the beginning. Because what happened, the way he was describing it, that she made a lot of assumptions and concluded based on some assumptions that he would also be attracted to her. That's an opportunity for that coach. Instead of getting uncomfortable and with that, and you will feel uncomfortable, be like, I have a feeling that might show up in other parts of your life. She might be making assumptions in other kind of relationships in her life. that might be hurting you as a person. And more than likely, that's probably what's happening. And it's actually the coach's job to explore that. Let's explore what happens. And as soon as that gets clarified,
Yes.
you
Yes.
process it, you feel it, you understand it. That might not even be an issue. They might have confused their own assumptions, and the feelings might have come from that because they've assumed a bunch of signals from the other person, or they've assumed certain things that that person has done. But if that was not the case, they might have not even felt attracted to that person in that way. So opportunity to support. So always be in, even when you're, for example, this is why we say that even when you're in the process of sales, you're still their coach. When you're dealing with objections, you're challenging them, you're still their coach. When you see problems, you're still their coach. So you can explore that with them, with the lens that they're a human being. These things could happen, and you can honor them for having those emotions, but you can explore it as well.
I love that. I wanted to explore another, like that's really well said, Faisal. I want to explore another area of communication boundaries, and like how the professional relationship itself, like you can be a therapist, but how do you respond to a client contacting you on your personal side, right? Like, so typically a therapist, they may have email with you and they may have sessions, but with coaching, sometimes we interact with our clients through text. Most therapists don't do that, right? As far as I know, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And so like, what is the appropriate level of boundary in communication? Like, for example, if a client texts you in the middle of the night, do you call them back right away? Do you wake up? You know, like, how quickly do you respond? Do you establish boundaries around like that? And like, if somebody's texting you all the time, like, what do you do? It's an interesting question. That definitely has happened to me in the past, especially early on in my career before I had clear boundaries set for myself. And just, I think part of it goes back to the professional clarity that you establish with somebody about expectations and your response to them. Like, how you respond to somebody indicates your boundaries in a lot of ways. But like, let's get a little more explicit and conscious about what those intrusions or boundaries or allowances can be set up in a professional coaching relationship. And granted, there's a range, and each coach will be different.
Yeah, there's definitely a range. I mean, as a baseline, I make it clear that I might respond within 24 hours. Like 24 hours is a good, like if somebody's sending a message, email, unless it's an emergency, like within 24 hours, I will respond. The only exception that I've created around that with my clients is, and actually this happened recently. With one was a client who I've been with for a while, and he was going through a really rough time in his relationship, like to the point where he it was possibly going towards him being suicidal, and I needed him to check in constantly. So I basically got him to share voice notes with me, and I told him, even in that case, I said I will either respond at that time or a little bit later, but just leave the voice note with me, and they're just sharing their thoughts and emotions. And I wanted to make sure they were safe in that context. So I got him to share things pretty much every day, and I did respond pretty much every day. But that was a very specific situation for a short period of time, maybe for a couple of months, just until they got out of that funk. I also recently onboarded a client who was I walked her through a process where I thought it was a little, and this is a dangerous thing for there are certain tools that you might borrow from different models that can go into people's pain and all sorts of areas. And I was a little bit concerned as to how she processes. It was very powerful for her. She's like, I didn't do this. I never got anything like this in therapy, and I never explored any of this stuff. This actually opened up a whole other area, but I could tell that she was shaken up by that. So, and she's not my client yet, so I still got her. Can you please check in with me every day? Just share morning and evening, just share your thoughts. And I stayed with her for a whole week at least. And then we met, and then I saw that she was good, and she had made a huge breakthrough, and that's part of the reason why she joined my program. But those are exceptions. Those are not the norm. Like if you see that somebody might be in danger, or somebody is struggling, or they're going through a rough time, and again, that's your choice as a coach, but at least I feel an ethical obligation to support that person, because I might be the only person supporting them in that way. And if they have a therapist or somebody else, I'll get them to check in with that therapist as well. But beyond that, within the coaching world, and I've even worked with coaches who are like, I can't go on vacation because I need to do coaching calls. I'm like, most of coaching is not emergency. Like you can go for 2 weeks and even a month, your client will understand. So, but we get these thoughts that, oh, I can't do anything, because he was an investor. He kept saying, he's like, well, I feel like coaching is limiting my freedom. Like, well, what's going to happen if you don't book a call for the next 3 weeks with this client? And as soon as he thought about it, he was like, no, nothing. I think the client will understand. Then he felt free. So the point is, coaching is not a world of emergency. Now, there are trauma coaches, and again, there are situations that might come up that are difficult, and that still might be might be an exception. Look at your model, look at how you're approaching people, but give yourself the space. And as a guideline, I tell clients, I don't normally, I will respond within 24 hours. If I'm on vacation, I'm communicating that ahead so they understand that I'm not reachable. I'll leave an emergency number or something like that if they need me. But that's not been an issue for the past almost 10 years.
Yeah. That reminds me of when I had a baby. And I was taking the month of January off, potentially, depending when the baby comes. So here's another interesting boundary example. I was, my wife and I were pregnant. We were expecting baby due in January, but you don't know when the baby's gonna come.
Yeah.
You don't know, but what you do know is that when the baby does come, you're gonna have weeks off, right? Several weeks off if necessary. And you also don't know what's gonna happen with the complications of that. So you might have a longer time off or a shorter time off. You don't actually know. And so part of the opportunity that I sensed with coaching clients is to tell them, we're celebrated about the pregnancy and all that stuff, and we're having a kid and all that, and then setting expectations like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. It could, the baby could come early by a month or two. So about two or so months out, I talked to them about like, hey, I always show up for my coaching sessions on time, 100% of the time. There will be one exception. Is if we're in labor and we're going to the hospital and we're having a baby and I don't have time to text you yet, I will probably find a way to text you and let you know. But this will be the one exception to the rule of cancellation notice that we have, which actually incidentally is in the contract, in the one pager. And so like they're like, yeah, of course, duh. Nobody was like, that's unacceptable. I demand, compensation. No. Nobody was like that.
You better not have your baby today.
And part of it was also kind of role modeling uncertainty, handling uncertainty in your life, right? And so a lot of clients, like sometimes they struggle with control, sometimes they struggle with uncertainty, and being able to navigate. Like I'm constantly navigating uncertainty, and given the uncertainty, I'm telling people who are impacted by that. That's a coaching opportunity often to talk about like, hey, this thing's going to happen. We don't know when. So there was an opportunity in that, but the expectation was that when the baby comes, all of our sessions will be off the calendar for a while. I'm expecting it to be 4 weeks. That's my plan. And even with my business partners, same thing. I'm probably going to be on for 4 weeks. And there's very little that I did during this 4 weeks, except for have family stuff. And I focused 100% on my family. And every client was very understanding of that. And so like, it was really easy to set that boundary. Like, and they were like excited when I got back. It was like, oh, let's share a picture of the baby, like here's what's going on. So I did share a little bit more about that because it's something, a big deal to celebrate with clients, and they learn about you that way. But always bring it back to that coaching professional relationship and just being professional about your vacations and your, time off that you're going to have, or even if there's an emergency that comes up. I think just professional courtesy requires us to let people know who are impacted by things happening in our life, what the situation is. So they have expectations and they don't, there's a professional, boundary that you set there. This is what's going to happen. And most clients will be pretty cool with that.
Yeah, and people, generally speaking, people are incredibly understanding. Like one of the things that I love people generally. I don't like, no matter where people are. I think if you communicate things right, there will be misunderstandings. There will be miscommunication on all sides. You're doing your best not to do that, and it's your job as a professional not to do that, not to miscommunicate. But you will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. Things will happen. People will miss sessions sometimes. People will not look at their calendar, or also, and you will learn from all that process. But most of the time, people are incredibly understanding. Think about it. You're dealing with human beings who have people around them. People can be very erratic. So just know that just even though you're a professional, they understand that you're a human being, especially if they understand a little bit about your story, what's happening in your life, like challenges you're going through, especially if you're having a baby, people will be incredibly supportive. So we want to wrap. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff here, and I just want to conclude with a few key things. One that I think that I take away from this, and then Daniel, maybe you can go through yours too. One is that be very clear about the purpose of your relationship with your client, and make it clear from the first session. Make it clear every session by the way that you show up, by your intention, by your energy, and by the way that the other person. Sometimes we need to communicate that, and possibly you could possibly make that a part of your contract or process. That's completely up to you how you want to phrase that, frame that. Maybe you can look into that a little bit, borrow some literature from the therapy world, how they communicate that. We can research that a little bit too. And finally, I think at the end we talked a lot about what is it, how are you showing up in terms of you being professional or not. Like, as long as you have that lens, as long as you have that intention, you keep that top of mind in the first 5 minutes, you set intentions, and know that we're dealing with human beings who might have emotions, feelings, they might have misunderstandings, all sorts of stuff. Don't react to it. You don't need to take it personally one way or another, whether clients get angry or they feel attracted to you or something else or towards somebody else. Or you might hear something shocking that a client did. You do not need to react. Just explore it. And that's the I think the advanced level of coaching is that put a pause on your judgments. Your mind will have judgments because you have your own values, beliefs, and all sorts of stuff, but put a pause on it and explore with the client. More often than not, you'll find that everybody's struggling and they want to work through this stuff, and it's your job as a coach to help them. And finally, take it one step at a time. And I would say you're going to learn and grow as you do this. Most things you can recover from. And if you have challenges, be part of a community. And this is why we have a community. And this is why the coach reached out to me. Is like, how the hell do I handle this? How do we deal with these situations? Most of us don't know. We're learning as we're going. And I've learned by talking to other coaches, just like we are doing right now. And when you are part of a professional community, and this is why I love conferences, being part of a community, because you can always have somebody who you can check in with. How did you do this? I'm reaching sometimes for example, we have a couple of relationship coaches. Whenever I run into challenges, I'll be like, how do you handle this? How do you approach this? And I get really amazing feedback. And sometimes I've even gone near to handing over a client to somebody, and instead of them taking on, they're like, do this. Try it out first. If it doesn't work out, then maybe I'll consider it. And they're like, this is the power of having community and friends that will help you as you move forward. But maybe Daniel, you can share your takeaways
I
too.
love all your insights. I agree with everything you said. I would say bring it back. No matter what, this is a boundary conversation is about the relationship, the coaching relationship. So remember, it's a professional relationship. If you keep that in mind, and show up like a professional every time. And remember that the best way to do that is to know what the client's lighthouse is and make your relationship the other lighthouse that lets you get to that lighthouse. And your safety in every boundary challenge is the health of the coaching relationship. And the health of the coaching relationship to get to that lighthouse is the primary tool that you have to move this person forward. That's what they hired you for. And in order to have a healthy relationship, both parties need to have a healthy impact on their life. So think about what you need as a coach to have a healthy relationship with your clients and for you to have a healthy life, which allows you to set clear, healthy boundaries with them and make it explicit if you need to. Make explicit when you need to, which is often at the beginning. And the way you show up every single session makes it clear. And secondly, have other coaches in your life to talk about these challenges that you're facing in your coaching. Join a community like Coaching Mastery Community where you can have these conversations. But ultimately, you as a coach set the boundaries, you reinforce the boundaries, and you set up the relationship the right way. So plus everything else Faisal just shared, I totally agree. Awesome conversation today. Faisal, why don't we send this podcast to that coach specifically to listen to? Because they're probably thinking about this question a lot right now.
I will.
The one in our community who shall remain nameless.
Yes. And just there was one point we didn't touch on, and to just brush on it. Don't feel like you need to keep a relationship just because you've gone into it. If something goes towards abusive or some like that's without saying, like, if you need to terminate a relationship, it's become too personal, do it. Don't I mean, that's a big part of running a business is do what serves you as well. Don't just, like, if you see that somebody is, most of the time that's not the case. Like, if you see that somebody is not the right fit for you, not the right client, and they have an energy that you don't like, something is off in that, feel free to terminate it. Whether you give refund or not, that's based on your policy, but don't feel like you need to keep something just because you're trying to, like, if somebody's not open to growing, they're not open to growing. That's just a side note.
I would add to that, Faisal, if you are in a community of coaches where you can refer people to each other, if that person's just turning out to not to be a great fit, refer them to somebody else in your network, right?
Yeah.
That's another valuable reason to have a network of coaches, because somebody might refer someone to you too. So
yes, and make sure you, there's always opportunity in here, and part of the reason why we're having this podcast is so we're getting people, coaches, to think about all these issues, because when you're starting out, you're not thinking of any of this stuff. It's very rare. So this is giving you're learning so much way ahead. And please share this with other coaches who are starting out, or even those who have been in this game for a while. You could tell that there are areas we don't even know how to address, but this will get their thought process started and get them to become more intentional and make this industry more professional. I've heard horror stories about coaches, and when the more we remove the bad apples, I think the better the reputation of the industry gets, the more clients we get, and the better we serve people. So definitely share this with other coaches, and make sure you watch one of the episodes that's there. I think it's going to serve you. It should come up on the screen, and we'll see you soon next week.